Hey, Riley, what's up, man?
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me today.
Yes, sir. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah.
So, before we get into your latest album and what's going on these days, I want to know, we're looking at the calendar. It's March of 2024, 4 years ago. Everything came to a stop, created a lot of pivoting for the world of jazz musicians. How did you survive that time period and how did it change you?
Yeah, whew, what a throwback
Yeah.
that moment.
Sorry to do
Um,
that.
no. I mean, it was right around this time of year. I'd been on the road for a while and I was just starting to develop some of this music for this album, for the solo record. Um, and obviously everything stopped. Um, for my own situation, I'm part of a group called the Westerlies, which is a brass quartet. We do a lot of recording, touring, performing, and that was really a lifeline because it was, we're all like salaried members of the ensemble, so there was some stability from that for sure. That just economically allowed me to get by through that time of having no gigs, um, and yeah, there was a pretty quick pivot to all of the virtual stuff. With the Wesleys, we figured out some techniques so that we could actually perform um, while in separate locations and separate time zones. Even we were doing some live performances through some engineering that one of my bandmates, Andy Clausen, figured out for us to route our sound to each other and then combine it all and then stream it out. So there's a lot of technology going on at that time, but spiritually it was such an intense time, and especially in jazz music, such a generational intergenerational music, we lost so many uh of our elders as well, so um an emotional time in that sense too.
Yeah. So, how good does it feel to have this new album out?
So good, oh my gosh. uh I've been working on it for about 5 years, and more than just the time that was put in, it's my first record under my own name, so just how personal it feels and how authentic to me it feels is it's something that feels really good to share, and something that I wasn't thinking about when I was making it, but just the uh, the power of having people respond to it and getting to engage with them that way has been really special. When you share something that's so personal and then it resonates with someone else, that's a beautiful thing.
So, talk to me a little bit about what you're hoping the listener gets from this album. And it's a big deal when it's your first one with your name on it. And I mean, it's kind of a calling card. What are you hoping they get from this?
I hope that they can feel like they're being transported to the universe that the album lives within, because we spent a lot of time creating a sonic space and a sonic universe that hopefully feels very true to jazz music, to the history, to the lineage of this music, um, but also I think is quite unique. And my producers who I worked with, Rafik Bhatia, Chris Padishal, I think they really did an extraordinary job of creating the space, creating the world that surrounds all the sounds that are made, uh, so that you can just step into this room and spend 35 minutes in it and be transported to another place. So that's the main thing I hope a listener gets from this.
So, how did this journey begin into the music and more specifically jazz? Take me back to your childhood, where you were born and raised, and what were the seeds that kind of took root and became you?
Absolutely. I was born and raised Seattle, Washington, and Seattle has an incredible music education, specifically jazz education scene. The ecosystem there is really, really strong. I was lucky enough to study with a couple of educators there, Robert Natt, Clarence Acox. They're folks who have taught generations of musicians who have come from Seattle and then moved to New York and made a name for themselves. Um, Folks like Casa Overall, Tatum Greenblatt, great trumpet player, mentor of mine, Josh Deutsch, Carmen Staff, so many musicians. Um, so I first was exposed to jazz music and big band music more specifically when I was, you know, probably 6, 5, 6 years old going to hear my babysitters play in the high school jazz band. And it was that experience of seeing the music up close and seeing how much fun they were having that got me into it. And so by the time I was 8 years old, I got a trumpet and went to the hardware store and got a plunger mute, and I wanted to, copy all those big band sounds. So I was hooked pretty young. Um, and then fast forward few years, and in addition to that scene in Seattle, there's also this incredible scene of improvised music, and folks like Wayne Horvitz became a big mentor of mine and opened my ears to all sorts of other uh, avenues of approaching the music and approaching improvised music. Um, so that's sort of what I grew up with, and then I moved to New York. I studied at Juilliard, um, and really formed a lot of my New York community while I
Yeah.
was in school there.
So I saw an interview recently with Miles, and they asked him why he used the mute so much, and he said it mimics the sound of the human voice the best. And I didn't
Yes.
realize that. That was his.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, the trumpet players in Duke Ellington's band trying to make all those vocal effects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love the mutes.
Yeah. So what was the first big time jazz show you saw? Like when you were old enough and got out, what was the one that blew you away?
That's a fun question. Let's see. Um, I mean, there was one that made quite an impact on me, which is I saw when Marsalis and the Jazz Land Center Orchestra come through Seattle. It must have been, around 2000, 2001. Um, I just started playing trumpet. I managed to get myself backstage, and met Winton, and uh, just to be in his presence at that time was really inspiring. He gave me some great advice. He told me to practice slow, which is something I still need to remember
Yeah.
today because everyone wants to do things so fast. But if you want to learn something, you got to practice it slow. Um, so that was a real, inspiring moment, right? That hit me right when I was just getting going. So it
Yeah.
was a combination of what they were doing and where I was in my life. Um, and then growing up in Seattle, there were so many concerts. I mean, one person who also comes to mind is Roy Hargrove. I used to go see him every time he came through Seattle, which was always at least once a year. I'd go every night. I'd go to the sound checks. Um, I'd, you know, just to hang out at the club as long as they would have me. And then finally, when I was older, about to move to New York, that's where I first met John Batiste, was playing in his band, and John was at Juilliard. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be at Juilliard. And then Roy, uh, gave me a lesson, invited me to play with the band. So it's all those, that's where I got a sense of what a community jazz is more than just music.
So, coming to New York, you obviously are very cognizant of the hallowed venues that exist here in the Mecca.
Hmm.
What's the one stage you had the chance to play on where you're like, I can't believe this is happening? And what's the stage that you eventually at some point want to play
Aha.
on and say that again?
I mean, the Vanguard is the Mecca. I've never played a sound on that stage, but I've been in that room so many times, and the, there's just an indescribable feeling every time you go down those stairs. Um, but the first part of the question, uh, Carnegie Hall, it never gets old. I've gotten to be on that stage. Well, actually, there are three stages within Carnegie Hall, and I've been on a couple of them. But the big stage in there, my favorite is sound check because like you'll do the sound check and then people clear out, and then sometimes you can just play some notes in that room and listen to the room, and that's always so special.
Yeah. So what do you like the best about being a professional musician? There's a myriad of things that go into it, but what do you look forward to the most every day?
I think it goes back to what I was saying about the community. It's like I'm surrounded. I guess in other jobs you might think of them as coworkers, but in music we get to find collaborators that inspire us, that we love to be with, that um, excite us and open our mind. So the fact that the people I get to work with, whether I'm touring, whether I'm in the studio, um, or just on a day-to-day basis in rehearsals, all that stuff, it's such a stimulating and curiosity-driven profession.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's my favorite thing about it.
I didn't realize that until I started getting into it. I've had the show since 2011, and I just
Yeah,
wasn't quite sure what the community was like, but it blows me away all the time how much that idea is passed to each successive generation. There's this humility, there's this humble nature of very talented people, but there's also this notion, like with Winton, sending you advice, keeping that torch burning bright and giving it to the
right.
next generation.
Absolutely. I think that's 100% true. And I think you also hear that in the music, you know.
Yeah.
It shows itself in the relationships and in the great bands that we love and all the communicate it's all communication, it's all listening, and that's the music on the bandstand and that's in life all.
So the one thing too about going through the pandemic was a lot of cats were leaving New York. It was just there was the economics weren't in anybody's favor, and people were worried that maybe enrollment would go down in colleges. But it seems like things have gotten back. And what's your
Mhm.
sense of how strong the jazz community is in 2024?
My sense right now in New York is that it's just as thriving as ever. People are out playing every single night. You know, you're constantly in situations where it's sort of like living in a music festival where every night, there are all these different stages, and it's like, oh, I want to go over here, but then I'm going to miss this thing over here. So I think there's no shortage of that. Um, yeah, and to me, it's just I spend more of my life on the road now than at home.
Yeah.
Um, so every time I get to come home, it's such a treat that like, there's such a strong community and everyone's out playing all the time. It's like uh, it feeds you, in this way. You come home, you get your fix, and that inspiration inspires you to uh, get back out on the road.
So why do you love jazz?
Mm. It's always hard to articulate, but I think about the feeling I get when I listen to Louis Armstrong or the feeling I get when I listen to Thelonious Monk.
Yeah.
Um, it is such a profound statement of expression and of individuality, but it also requires, I think, as you were alluding to, this uh, humble state of being open and listening. And I think the where those two things meet and the dance of finding that in a groove, both metaphorically and literally, is what gives this music this thing that we can't always name, but we know when we feel it.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are?
Um, you know, I I identify it as someone who is in this lineage of the music, uh, and that's I see my ancestors in the music. It's like, you got Buddy Bolden, you got King Oliver, you got Louis Armstrong, you got Rex Stewart, Roy Eldridge, all these, and Dizzy and Miles. Like, there's this long family tree of trumpet players, and I see myself it's a privilege, but to be part of that lineage, to be in this generation, and to take the things that have been handed down from my mentors, and I see that in the same way I see my literal family, of my ancestors, uh, parents, grandparents, great grandparents, all that. It's like it's all sort of intermixed for me, and so I'm just a product of both, my literal family, but also my musical family in that lineage. And I think this album hopefully is a real statement and a meditation on me just trying to be completely myself. And there's so much of all of them in there, but who I am is uh, is hopefully directly reflected in the sound I make, in the choices I'm making, uh, in the collaborations I'm choosing. All that stuff comes together.
So the name of the album is Riley. It's a wonderful album. I've listened to it quite a bit. I still love
Thank you.
driving around listening to it. It's your debut.
Cool.
It's a big statement, big shout out into the world. If anyone wants to get this proper physically, or if they want to find out about any live shows you have, anything about your world, how can they do
Yes. My website is RileyMulherkar.com, or you can just Google me, it'll come up, or Instagram, of course, just my name at Riley Mulherkar. Same with Facebook. A lot of shows on the road with. I just got off a couple release shows for this album. Now I'm back to touring with my group, the Westerlies. We just came off a 3 week tour, um, but I'm plotting some more touring for this solo project. So everyone listening, please stay in touch, and I'll let you know when the next shows pop up.
I love it. Riley, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck. Have a great tour, man.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes,
Honored to
sir.
be here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.